Welcome to the Habitat Podcast, the podcast for wildlife habitat management, hunting strategy, and land stewardship. And now, your host, Jared Van Hees.
Welcome back, everybody, to the Habitat Podcast, where we are here to become better habitat managers. I'm your host, Jared Van Hees, and we have a great episode here for you guys tonight. We have a returning guest way back from episode 11, Mr. Phil Holcombe out of Pennsylvania. So Phil is a small property habitat manager like myself and Brian. And we had a great episode with him way back on 11. So if you haven't heard that yet, go back to 11 and check it out. It's a great podcast on no-till food plots, throw and mow, spray and pray, quick and easy food plot type stuff with minimal equipment. That is all back in episode 11. This one, though, we have Phil back to talk about the killing tree. So Phil has designed a killing tree on his property where he's had half dozen, if not more, bucks killed or opportunities at mature bucks on small 9-acre property in Pennsylvania over the past 5-6 years. So every single year, Phil is having an encounter at this stand, and we talk about how to make one of those on his property and your own property. We talk about the difference between modification and manipulation for hunting purposes and habitat management. We talk about reducing your overall pressure by hunting one dialed-in stand with great access versus other stands with halfway access. We talk about precision volume hunting, understanding the time of day to hunt, thermals, wind. Phil has all of this dialed in for this one stand, and it's bulletproof. And it's been working for him every year. We talk about funneling, steering, and creating some different patterns and movements, and trying to force completely new patterns versus tweaking old patterns. That's something that Brian and I talk about all the time in our habitat plans is, you can change patterns, but it's often easier to just tweak an old pattern and funnel something down by your tree stand like Phil has done here. So guys, a great episode, very informative. I hope you guys enjoy it. I sure as heck did. And I know that it's another great episode with Phil. We're going to have him write an article or two for the Habitat Journal up at habitatpodcast.com. So be sure to check that out at habitatpodcast.com and go up to the journal up top, and we will have a bunch of new articles coming out there this year. Now, this podcast segment is brought to you by Packer Max Cultipackers, guys. Lincoln is already going through a ton of drums over there in Grand Rapids at the Packer Max headquarters. If you haven't seen yet, check out our YouTube page at Habitat Podcast. We did a cribs version, if you will, or a tour of Lincoln's facility over in northern Grand Rapids, and it's a great place. We talk with Link about his Packers, and you see how they're made. You see, they're all assembled here in America, made in America, and ready to come right to you. So check that out. And then we also cover, some cool things he's offering for the Habitat Podcast listeners. So, for instance, if you want a Packer Max this spring, we have $25 off any Packer with the code HPC25. Habitat Podcast 25, HPC 25. You get $25 off the Packer of your choice. Thank you, Lincoln, for your support, guys. His Packer is great. This podcast is also brought to you by HuntWise. So if you guys are not using a mapping feature on your phone yet, whether it's habitat related, measuring out your food plots, maybe miscanthus lines, determining how many rhizomes you need this spring, or even, just scouting through the woods. I use it for scouting the most. I use the HuntWise app. They're over at huntwise.com. You can look them up on any app store available. So what I do, I have that on when I'm walking through the woods all the time. The different layers are very helpful with different topo, shading, etc. But mainly during our land plan services, when I'm walking around with a client, I have that thing fired up. I'm taking notes. I'm drawing shapes. I'm painting the picture in my mind while I'm walking the property. And then when I get back home, I can, turn that into the artwork map that these beautiful maps that we give for our land plan clients. So I use HuntWise every time I'm in the woods pretty much. And it's great for property borders and ownership. There's another instance in Ohio this year where we needed access from the bottom of a holler instead of the top where we had it from. And HuntWise helped me find a phone number and make a call and get access. So, us and the guys on the lease had great access by just using that app. So I urge you to check them out. Great Michigan company over here at HuntWise. Hit your app store or huntwise.com. I'd like to thank Killer Food Plots, Michigan Whitetail Pursuit, Morse Nursery, The Habitat Hook, Realtree United Country Land Pro, Lake States Realty and Auction. All right, guys, if you haven't been to habitatpodcast.com, check it out. We have our land plan services up there where we're just there to help you guys get started on your property and come up with a habitat plan and script on what you want to do over the next 5, 10, 50 years. So check us out. We're up there at the land plan tab at the top of habitatpodcast.com. We also have all of our podcasts, our hats, our shirts. If you want to support the show and like what we're doing here, all that's up at the website. And then lastly, like I mentioned, we have our Habitat Journal. But what I want to talk about real quick before we get started is our Habitat group on Facebook. It's called Habitat Chat. We're already up to 700 members, and that group is just a huge learning dictionary of information, just amazing over there at Habitat Chat. And I'm just blown away by all the posts that are on there every single day. So I urge you guys to check it out at Habitat Podcast on Facebook. Go to our group tab and you'll see the group Habitat Chat. We'd love to have you there. And if you've left us a good review on iTunes or Spotify in the past and you haven't gotten a free decal from me yet, go to that group. I'm going to have a post up there where you guys can comment if you left me a review, and I'll make sure to get you that free 5-inch HP decal for leaving us a good review on iTunes or Spotify or Stitcher or any of the above. So with that being said, I appreciate y'all's support. Thank you so much for coming back. We have an awesome episode here for you, Mr. Phil Holcombe out of Pennsylvania.
Today I need to be on this one. It's a east wind tomorrow. I can hunt this one. We're gonna have a north wind the next couple of days. I'm gonna hunt this one. And what I've just done, especially if I don't have like bulletproof access, I've just basically overhunted the property in a matter of a week by jumping around to different states, right?
Yeah.
So I think, I think our buddy Al, actually, he had written a blog with you guys on small properties, and he kind of mentioned like putting all the eggs in one basket. I think that's quite often quite the way, like a pretty solid way to go when you're dealing with a very small property, especially if you have the ability to maybe hunt some other places, some public land, have permission pieces, whatever. Just the ability to not, put all the pressure on, into one place through the whole season. Get it dialed in for when you can hunt it, under what conditions, and you can go from there. A lot of times you hear a lot of people talking about like volume hunting versus like precision strike type of hunting. I kind of have my place set up for, it's kind of like a combination of the two. Like I'm looking for a certain set of conditions during a certain time of year, and then I can get into that stand under those conditions, and I can hunt it several days in a row, and I don't really have any worry about over pressuring it.
As long as I want to dive into that a little further too. You know what I mean? I want the nitty gritty on why you feel that you're never going to pressure it. I have some ideas in my head on how you set it up, but I want to hear your way at it. And just to let you know, I hit the record button a few minutes ago, so we're just gonna roll right into it because you're already on a roll. And so I guess before we dive too far into, I mean, you started it off by talking about very important pieces of pressure on small property. I mean, glad you started off with that. That's we harp on that all the time, as you know. Al wrote a blog on it. You wrote a blog on it years ago. I think I responded to your email today. I think you wrote that like way back in 2018 or something, didn't you? You or maybe even before that. You sent it to me, and I never responded to the email. I was like, oh, this is sweet. I read it.
Yeah, I've got I had written an article for a small magazine. I don't even know if they're still around anymore or not. In 2013, I don't know if that's the one you're talking about or not. But then in 2018 or early 2019, a buddy of mine, Steve Bartilla, had asked me if I would write a little something up that he would put on his Facebook page, and I did that.
Yes.
And so there was that one. They were both kind of like, I don't know, similar. One was the article was a more in detail version, and then what I wrote up for Steve being kind of like more short form, abbreviated kind of similar concept, same type of thing, but just more
shortened up a little bit.
Yeah, Facebook post sized.
Is that hard for you to make something smaller like that when you've already written it larger in terms of number of words, word count?
Yeah, and most of my buddies will tell you, I've got I can kind of run on a subject, for quite a bit. Some of the guys that have actually been on the podcast before, some of my buddies, Rich Yagi and Eric Zelensky and Teddy Clark and and those guys, in our group, they call it Finn, PHIN, Phil Holcombe induced narcolepsy. I might get going on something, and the next thing I know, everyone's kind of dozed off for a while. Oh
my gosh, that's hilarious.
Yeah. They like to remind me of that.
Well, I mean, for those who haven't heard episode 11 of the Habitat podcast back in July of 2018, you were on here and we covered quick and easy food plots, no-till food plots, food plot insurance, addressing a new property, core versus home range bucks, food plots in one day, a lot of quick, easy food plot stuff, which was huge. That was a very popular episode. And I think you even heard that from some people who've reached out to you in the meantime. And I
still get messages on Facebook and stuff like that, on a fairly regular basis of, hey, I stumbled on this, like just
2.5 years later.
Yeah, just ask. I got some questions or whatever, and more often than not, I end up making a new friend out of it, and that's kind of cool, A lot of times I'm like, look, man, it might be easier if you just call me or something, because my two thumbs tapping away on my phone are just not gonna cover it. You know what I mean? So but yeah, that's all. That's cool. Really, I enjoy hearing from people and being able to help people and that type of stuff.
No, and you're good at it. The way you can convey the information, whether you're, the PHIN or not, it's good and it's simplified, and I mean it works. So, some of the no-till stuff we covered before, not to dwell too much on that, I just encourage everybody to go back to 11, all the way back 100 episodes ago, and you'll find that one. And we've been talking with Phil and friends with Phil since then. And you've had a couple good runs since then, haven't you?
Yeah, definitely. Actually, the fall after that podcast, I shot my best buck to date. And that was a pretty rough year for food plotting.
Yes,
it started raining, I think it was July 7th, and then it didn't stop until like late October. So it was tough. And then it's kind of interesting because this past summer was the exact opposite. We had one of the more severe droughts we've had in this area, in decades. So, you know, that in and of itself, like, you gotta, like I said, with the observation, you try different things and different conditions. You keep track of the conditions and understand how they may or may not impact what you did, and you start to kind of figure these things out and have a lot of different experience to draw from and understand, like how you can kind of cope with a lot of different environmental conditions, and that's a big part of it. But yeah, 2018 was a good year. I shot it's 133 inch 8-point 4.5-year-old deer, and then the following year, 2019, I shot a nice 8-point younger deer. It's 2.5-year-old, and then 2020, this past fall, I shot a nice 3.5-year-old 110 inch 8-point, really good buck. All of them were really exciting hunts. I mean, the big 8-point was a late October buck, which is right about the time, like the way I kind of set things up on my property. That's like right when it really starts to shine. I mean, I'm sure that's the same across a lot of places.
Yeah.
Late October is gorgeous. It's like that's when things are really starting to happen.
Oh yeah.
That was an October 25th cold front evening. I had been getting deer on my small food plot there really early, like afternoon, like we're before daylight savings time, and between 1 and 2 o'clock in the afternoon I was getting them in there a lot. And I actually, when I got there that afternoon, and I can get to a certain point and I can see food plot from a distance, and I could see that there were several deer out there, and I was like, I still got enough time to run over to this other piece and get in a tree over there. I don't necessarily want to pressure them. And then I just kind of was like, you know what? I'm just going to walk up there like I own the place and climb in my tree. And more often than not, those deer, they're local. That was the one doe group that was in there all the time. They're encountering my scent all the time, all through the summer and into the early fall. And I'm in there still working on food plots and maybe even checking cameras and stuff like that. Like they're fairly habituated to me not being a threat. Now, if I try to sneak in there and they bust me acting like a predator, that's a bad thing. But if I just walk up there, they're going to see me from like 150 yards out, and they're going to be like, oh, wait, what's going on? I'm going to keep walking normal, upright, no eye contact. And they'll probably just run off like they normally do and be back in 45 minutes. So I did that. I just opted to, whatever, I'm going for it. Walked in there, bumped them off, climbed up my tree, got situated, and then continued to second guess that move for like the next 2.5 hours. And all I saw was 2 gobblers and a button buck who were quite entertaining because they were interacting with each other and stuff. But at the same time, I was like, okay, so I just blew that. That was dumb. I thought I knew what I was doing. Nope. And they never did come back in. And we were getting down to like the closing minutes. And I thought to myself, well, you know what? Before they show up right at, last light, and then I'm going to get stuck in the tree for 45 minutes or an hour, I might as well just exit now while nothing's here. I can see, I'm sure I'm clear. I can get down and get out clean. We'll give it a week, they'll be back to normal. No big deal, whatever. And as I was kind of like gathering my stuff up, I heard a deer on that determined pace, like not a trot, not a run, not a walk, but that determined, pretty brisk walk.
I love that pace.
Yeah. And it was down the hill from me, coming off the neighbor's piece. And I thought to myself, okay, so we got one coming in. Let's see what's happening. And I had known that there was this one particular buck that had been in there a little bit early, about a week prior, with daylight on the clock. And so I'm at that point in time, I got a lot of beech trees in the area, so they hold their leaves fairly late.
Yep.
And still green, and so I'm having a hard time looking back in that direction because of all the beech leaves. And I hadn't heard the walking in 30 seconds or whatever it was, and so I'm like, okay, it's got to be around here somewhere. And then all of a sudden I realized the deer was standing about 26, 27 yards right below me, scanning up as best he could up towards the food plot. But that's a part of what makes this stand good is some of the blockading, hinging and stuff that I've done from that direction of approach, so that they can't just come in and then stand there and scan and see into the food plot and know that there's nothing there.
Right. Exactly.
And so they've got to commit to I have 2 trails. And the other thing is usually the way the wind is, especially in the evening, at that point in the evening, the thermals, things have started to drop and are starting to head downhill. If I have a westerly prevailing wind, and as high into the tree as I am, and the approach from that direction is downhill of the tree already, so I'm really high up in the tree for where that deer was standing. And the combination of the thermals and the prevailing gives that deer the sense of he's also scent checking the area, but he can't visually see beyond what he can scent check. So he felt comfortable, and that's what ended up working out for me. From where he was standing, if he chose to go to the trail to the left, I had a slight concern of getting winded, but most likely he would be. I would get a shot before he got to that point. If he chose the trail to the right, I was good until he was at 12 yards or 15 yards in my lap. So there was an intense little bit there where he was standing surveying, and I mean he was testing the wind. He chose the trail to the right, and I got my shot at 12, 13 yards or whatever it was. So
very nice.
Big old 8-point too.
Yeah, he was 201 pounds dressed. Big deer, really big deer. And he followed a network of trails that I had made to kind of funnel some movement out of a generalized kind of bedding area that is a little bit further back into the neighbor's property. But the way this kind of lays out, I was able to kind of neck down their options as they're coming across and out of that area to come up onto my property.
So Phil,
yep.
Before we get too far down that rabbit hole, just and anybody that didn't listen to episode 11, if you could just take a few minutes, introduce yourself real quick, tell people who you are, where you're from,
sure,
what you do for a living, if you want to share that, and any other info you might want to add.
Yeah, not a problem. My name's Phil Holcombe. I live in northeastern Pennsylvania, very rural area, and I have a small property that has been in the family for couple generations at this point, and got kind of interested in habitat wildlife habitat, specifically deer habitat, probably right around 2001, 2002, in that time frame. At that point in time, there were some resources that you could find on the internet. And then over the next couple of years, those resources seem to really kind of grow. One of the main ones, which I'm sure a lot of the listeners probably were a member of or a part of, was the QDMA user forums, along with some of the other forums that kind of spawned from that. But anyway, yeah, I work for a really pretty large corporation. I work in manufacturing. We make paper products, and
It's not Thunder Mifflin, is it?
Nope. Different type of paper, paper towels and toilet paper. So
because you're not far from Scranton.
No,
Yeah.
Not far from Scranton, not too far at all. But yeah, so I've been I grew up in a hunting family. I grew up bow hunting, gun hunting, small game, deer, pretty well generalists. And I've been involved with the Pennsylvania Bow Hunters Festival, which takes place right here in Sullivan County every year for the past 64 years. It's one of the largest, if not the largest, event of its kind. My grandfather and my great uncle were two of the founding members of the festival association.
That's cool.
Yeah, I'm third generation. My son will be fourth generation. I'm currently on the board of directors and the president of the board. So bow hunting, deer hunting, in general, just something that I've been obsessed with since I was a kid. So I did spend some time living in a pretty suburban environment on the east end of Long Island in New York, and spent a lot of time out there bow hunting small parcels, and that's kind of what has always been something that helped me when I moved back to Pennsylvania and having this particular parcel in the family. And with it being so small, a lot of people just kind of overlook those type of places and think, it's too small to hunt, that type of thing. And
Sure.
having spent quite a bit of time hunting parcels that were even smaller than that,
Same here.
in the suburban environment, that's a pretty good chunk of ground to work with. So, that's kind of where it started for me, and some of the, just recognizing that there's an opportunity there. And I think that's an important thing for everybody to consider. There's opportunities out there that I think a lot of people are overlooking, and I'd like to encourage, people to kind of step back and take a look at them, evaluate them. I mean, sometimes they're good, sometimes they're not. Sometimes you find an absolute honey hole, So,
Absolutely.
but yeah, that's kind of how I came to it.
Very cool. Well, getting back to the killing tree that you were talking about, I want to hear more about that. Let's dive into that, and what your thought process is, and why you think that a single killing tree is a good idea.
Yeah. So, like I was saying before, I think sometimes on a smaller property, your best bet in a lot of ways is to just really dial in one particular setup and keep that pressure down. With the smaller property, it can be pretty easy to overpressure it, and then it's done. deer will avoid the stand locations, if not the majority of the property in and of itself, and you're just not going to have any opportunities. So I think in a lot of ways, getting dialed into one particular setup just kind of helps abate that, especially if you can figure out the access pieces, getting in and getting out clean, as well as then once you're in the stand, making sure that you're not kind of blowing the place up. So my particular instance, I have some topography that really works to my advantage. A good chunk of my property is actually below the military crest of the hill, with the rest of it kind of coming above it. So I have an opportunity there to kind of set up on that and use a combination of prevailing winds and thermals to give me an advantage that makes it so that once I get in that tree, I can feel pretty confident that I'm not going to get picked off by the wind. Access is the second piece. Honestly, I would rate my access to that tree more like an A- instead of an A+. I have another tree that's about 37 yards away that the access is better. The problem is the cover.
Sure.
I get picked off in that tree. I've tried that tree. I get picked off. Visually, I get picked off. However, the access portion is actually better in that tree. I've tried a couple of different things to kind of try to work around or prevent the cover issue, but I just haven't found anything that seemed to work to the degree that I would like. So I've I've kind of stuck with this one particular tree, and it's worked out. So can't argue with that. It's in terms of why it's I'd say an A- is I have about a 25-yard window that I've got to walk across going into the stand, that there's a likelihood that deer are going to walk across. However, that buck I shot in 2018 walked across that and never put his nose to the ground. I do take some scent elimination precautions. I'm not nearly as anal retentive about it as I used to be. When I first really started getting serious into bow hunting, all of that stuff was just kind of starting to come up with all the carbon clothing and all the sprays and washes and stuff like that. Right. Were really popular, and taking it to the umpteenth degree was starting to be a thing, and I really went down that pretty deep for a number of years, and then it just got to the point where it was too time consuming and expensive, and you're just well, how many how many deer have been killed throughout the eons without any of this. I'm sure there's a way to just kind of have a happy median.
Oh yeah.
Currently, my scent elimination, or scent control rather, because I think it's more of a control than it is an elimination proposition, has been focused on the feet now. And even saying that, I still wear leather boots all the time. I don't have to have rubber boots or anything like that, but I basically just scrub my feet pretty good, keep clean socks, scent-free socks. I spray down my boots pretty heavily. Pretty much everything from the knee down gets sprayed and everything right before I walk away from the truck to head to the stand. So far, that's been good enough for 95 to 98% of all deer that encounter my scent trail. And the remaining percent of those, that remaining 2 to 5%, have a momentary pause where they recognize the fact that there was some sort of a scent. It usually results in a head up, look around, cautious walk, and then right back to normal. So, and again, I attribute a part of that to the fact that I'm on the property enough that I have most of the resident deer have encountered my scent at some degree, whether a few minutes old to a few hours old, a number of times throughout the year, and it's never meant danger. So they just, they're fairly habituated to it. It's not a complete alarm. And then the time of year that I'm focusing my efforts on trying to kill a buck, the bucks have enough testosterone, aggression, etc., enough interest in the ladies where maybe a residual scent of a human they've never encountered is hardly enough to keep them from moving forward. Or, if it is, like I said, it's about a 25-30 yard stretch. There's a good chance that they're in range already.
Right.
And so that's a gamble I'm willing to take. And so far it's worked out for me. I'm sure at some point in time, it's probably, had one encounter it while I, after I'd already been gone and maybe have an adverse reaction. It's that, you just don't know. You never know. But so far it's been, minuscule enough that I don't see a reason to change it, but
broke, don't fix it.
Exactly. And, but who's to say another small piece, another property, it might be enough that you really need to reconsider your access and move to the other tree and try to make that work or whatever. But, that again, it goes back to the observation. You just got to be paying attention to that type of stuff. But going back to the killing tree, like I said, access is a major component. Understanding what your prevailing wind and or thermals are doing and how you can use them to your advantage. And then on top of that, you start to get into your habitat modifications or manipulations and improvements, right?
Sure.
I think
now before you get on that path, with this philosophy, starting from scratch, and you want to pick out that single tree, do you try to find something where the deer are spending time passing through, or are you looking more at access as your first priority? Like, walk us through your mentality of finding that killing tree, like what your priorities are.
Yeah. So, that's definitely one that's that's $1 million question. I think in some instances you can probably just manufacture it. And I think in a lot of instances it's more a matter of picking one that is already in a place that has a pattern of movement, and then determining what it takes to alter or improve the pattern of movement to make that tree work. So in this particular instance, it was a number of years of, I literally just was like, okay, that tree is like the right size. It's kind of like where I want it to be. I'm going to put a stand in that, and then I can actually, put a food plot over here and put one over here. And then it just, it started to work from there. So a part of that initial setup was dumb luck of that tree happened to be in the spot where it was. And I thought that seems like a good tree. And then several years of hunting from that tree, I started to realize there was opportunities there to make it a little bit better after having watched a number of deer just out of range or not come through on a line of movement that was going to bring them to me, and just starting to see these things. I'm like, okay, so there's got to be some way that I can, alter this so that I'm just creating, a pattern of movement that is putting them in range for me. And another thing I think is important too on small properties, and this depends on the exact layout and everything. I don't spend any time trying to get deer to bed there. I basically want them to like filter or cycle through, so that I'm reducing that potential for detection. I don't want a whole lot of time. I don't want them to spend a whole lot of time. I want them to spend enough time.
Makes sense. Yep.
Right. If I had a bigger property, I would be focusing more on capturing as much of their movement as possible. But, let's face it, on that small of a property, you're not capturing that much of the daily slice of the movement. You know what I mean? Like that, you're just not going to. So you might as well try to set it up to be as advantageous for hunting as possible. And that's one of the points I wanted to make too, was with the smaller pieces, you're looking at from a hunting perspective, if that's your overall objective and priority is to create the best hunting experience that you can, then by all means, that's where you need to focus. And that's usually done through your habitat modification or manipulation, creating favorable patterns of movement to be capitalized from a hunting perspective, not so much a broader habitat management or improvement type of philosophy. That's not to say that it can't be done both ways, but to me, I start with that hunting focus and then kind of work my way out. I've gotten, where on my property, I do things that I am making improvement for non-target species, not all for the deer, pollinators, small mammals, birds, I enjoy doing all that stuff. I target non-native invasive plant species and work on trying to knock them down. But at the same time, my focus goes back to what do I need to do to set this up to be able to get the most out of the hunting. I think that's an important thing. I know a lot of people who listen to the podcast probably are very much interested in, broader spectrum habitat management things. And I think that's great. And on the smaller properties, while you may not be able to make as significant of an impact on the landscape level, you still can, do some more stewardship oriented things that ultimately increase or improve the type and quantity of habitat available for things other than deer. So I just wanted to make sure that that's that's something that people could keep in mind too. You can have your cake and eat it too. In a lot of ways.
That's what I was just going to ask you. I was going to ask you to define your difference between those two, because I'm in the same exact boat. I mean, like you said, if I had an extra 10-acre field that I wasn't doing anything with, it'd be a lot easier to add in more of a designation for, maybe 5 more acres for pollinators instead of 1 or 2, et cetera, right? Like, but to your point and my point and Brian's, our original idea when we set this whole thing up was, to help us have a better hunting experience. And now, like you said, it's grown into, our listeners and guests, we, focus on everything, not just deer. But I'm glad you kind of mentioned that, because I think it's something to think about, and it's okay. Because even if you only set up for deer, you are accidentally helping a lot of other things out, right?
Yeah, totally. Absolutely. And usually I've found, like, most people, like, their introduction to doing anything related to habitat might be in order to have better hunting for deer. Eventually down the road, what ends up happening is a lot of people get exposed to other concepts, the idea or the ability to do things to the habitat that might benefit not just deer but other species. And then
Yep.
like me personally, like having like I said, I used to live in a very suburban environment, and I was an outdoor an environmental resource educator when I was there. And one of the things that I did, like as a part of my job, was I made wood duck nesting boxes. I made them. I went out and scouted the wetlands and drainages and things to install them. I went out and installed them. I checked and maintained them. I kept the data from all of the basically like the hatch success. And I've never hunted a wood duck a day in my life. I've never duck hunted ever.
Still?
Like, yeah, still haven't.
Awesome.
I mean, I would love to. I don't have like a whole lot of opportunities, and that time of the year, like I got deer on the brain.
It's deer season for sure.
Right.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
it's just one of those things that it's just never been a priority to me. It's not to say I wouldn't. I mean, I have lots of friends who do. But you know what I mean? Like that's where I think a lot of people can end up sometimes. Like they're focused on deer. They start to learn about habitat, improving it, etc. for deer and for hunting purposes. And then like the opportunity arises for, and it's like, or some something happens and you're like, oh, well, look at that. No kidding. I didn't know that doing that would have helped this, and I saw it and it happened, and like, that's awesome. I'd like to do that again. Or what else can I do? So personally, I think that, we in our kind of community have gotten so solely deer focused and the blinders on, and, not only deer, but, big bucks, mature bucks, this, that, like that, we start to like, we've kind of forgotten about all these other opportunities for, helping other species and just enjoying them. And then it's another excuse to get out there and do another project.
Yep.
Also it's something that you may be doing it to help this other species, but it's still ultimately it's adding to the diversity. Like there's nothing wrong with that. I think people can do that on small parcels. Obviously there's consideration depending on the area where you're in. If you got an extremely high deer density, you could be for an uphill battle, trying to do certain things to help other species, because the deer are just going to wipe it out without significant protection or, stuff like that. But, there's opportunities. And again, the observation, I'm really big on like, the experimenting, like being like, hey, I'd like to try that. Well, guess what? Give it a try. Just be observant, understand what's happening and how things are responding, document it if you have to. And then go from there. You know what I mean? You can always try to figure out another way to improve it.
It's just the evolution of one as a habitat manager. You're really just becoming better habitat managers. It's our slogan or whatever. We say it all the time. Shameless plug, but it's it's something like you said. We never thought about that until we were exposed to it later on. You learn about these other projects. Oh, those are cool too, and then you want to help out. Everything, because we care about these deer more than just to shoot them and eat them. So it's like it's kind of it's a cool all around, all encompassing thing. And I'm glad you dove into that. And I want to keep harping on this killing tree. Did you mention what kind of tree it was yet?
Yeah, it's a sugar maple.
How big around would you say?
I can't hug it.
Okay, so it's big. I
can't hug it at any height.
Okay.
And it about the level that the stand is on. There's 4 larger limbs that start to split off of the main trunk, so you get to kind of like nestle in. You're kind of tucked in a little bit. You've got
amazing.
some other limbs coming out off of them, which give like a depth of cover. It's a big enough trunk that if you're sitting in your stand or standing against the trunk, not moving, you're just not going to get picked off. You're not going to get silhouetted. The stand is 24 feet to the platform. It's sloped. The ground is sloped. So actually directly out in front of the stand, the land starts to slope up away from the tree. So having it at that height is kind of necessary because as deer come in from that direction, the closer they get, they're a little more, they're not at eye level. They're still below you, but you're not as high up as you are when they're right below you. And then behind the tree, it starts to slope away a little bit gradually. About 30 yards behind the base of the tree, the military crest of the hill drops right straight off, and it's steep. So deer approaching from the downhill side, I'm like way above their periphery, and their peripheral vision. And as long as I'm in there under the right wind conditions, my scent is way above them.
Nice.
In the morning with a rising thermal, they've got no chance of picking my wind if they're coming from the uphill, coming from downhill to the uphill. In the evenings, once it settles and it starts to fall, I need a particular prevailing wind to keep it from falling steep enough or fast enough to where a deer coming from that direction would be able to get into my scent stream.
Sure.
And that just happens to be a prevailing wind that's very common. So that increases the ability. I can hunt it in the mornings and the evenings. Awesome. As long as I have those conditions, and again, I've spent a lot of years sitting in there with everything from milkweed to the little bottles of the Windicator dust and all that stuff. I've even done the smoke bombs in a beer can with the top cut off, sitting on the platform of the stand. Just again, the observation, figuring out like these are the conditions, and don't hunt them when they're not right. And hunt them when they are right. And as long as the conditions are right, you can keep going back. As long as you're not, as long as you weren't detected, for the most part, you're good to keep going back. So some of the other things that set that up is so not only is
more about those traits, what's around it exactly.
Well, that location, so aside from where the tree physically exists on the landscape, again, where you got wind and thermal as well as access, those are important considerations. And then from there, kind of the attractions, like layering in the attractive modifications or manipulations, right? In this particular instance, like the way the property lays out, the way the surrounding properties lay out, and the way the deer identify or relate to all of those things, I needed an attraction, something that would bring them to me. And that particular attraction just turned out to be a highly attractive food source, particularly from, let's just say, September through January. The type of food plotting that I do, I've now got it where, even though it's a very small food plot, I have attractive food growing in it year round. I get deer in there all the time, 12 months a year, but I have it so the peak is really that September to January timeframe. In specific, October, November, December, drill it down even further, making sure late October through early December are like prime. That's what I'm shooting for, right? In terms of the food plot. And then
how big would you say that plot is?
it's only a third of an acre.
Yep, gotcha.
It's an irregular shape. And you know, in the previous episode, we went over kind of my methodology and what I plant and how I plant it. So
yeah, we can direct the listeners back there to hear all the good no-till stuff. And your soil's probably pretty good by now, I'd imagine, right? Yeah,
it's not bad at all. I got pretty good organic matter, and I'm just pretty much at a maintenance level in terms of my anything that I am adding in, and I've gotten to the point where I don't, outside of giving some brassicas a little boost of nitrogen. I don't do much of anything. Every three, I think I've been on 3 years. 3 years I'm adding some lime.
Okay.
That's about it. So you have that food attraction, and then mock scrapes and a water hole. So this year, like I said, this past summer and even into the early fall, we had like record drought conditions. And that water hole paid dividends. It was super popular. Outside of that, I will tell you this: there were times where I sat in my tree and I looked at that water hole and I was like, I should just get rid of that thing. It's just taking up space. Don't see a lot of use out of it for whatever reason. Some work, some don't. I have a creek right at the bottom of my hill. It's just one of those things. Sometimes they're highly attractive, sometimes they're not. Right. Just like brassicas, some places deer walk through, 2 foot tall brassicas to get to something else, and other places you can't grow them. So,
or just like a mock scrape. Some work, some don't get touched.
No, exactly. So, my mock scrapes I use basically for trail camera purposes to kind of get an inventory and an idea of what bucks are in the area. And I also use them on the hunting side for positioning the deer for a shot opportunity. Basically, I would say I have 3, the way the food plot lays out, I have 3 mock scrapes on it. And when I say 3, each one is like a cluster of licking branches with a big, it turns out to be like a truck hood underneath it that gets the ground that gets scraped up. So it's like each one is like 3 to 4 licking branches. There's only one of them that's not actually in bow range from that particular killing tree, but it creates the scrape line effect. So I've kept it. Anything else that allows that was a potential for a scrape for a buck to make, like, I've removed it. I just wanted it to all be just the ones that I could cover from that tree, basically. So those particular ones, 2000. Let's see, they're a decade old now. Some people use scents and have great success. Some people say they don't work or they alarm deer. Some people just pee in their own. I haven't used a commercially produced scent in a number of years. Like I said, they're going on a decade at this point. Sometimes August, September, I'll go in there with a stick and really rough up the ground underneath it and pee in it. And then that's about it. That's all I do to them in a given year anymore. So
you're saying that Phil Holcomb's urine is not commercialized yet?
Nope, not yet. Not yet. I think some people are afraid
of a business opportunity.
Yeah,
I'm just saying.
Well,
I sell plastic bottles for a living, so I mean,
Well, there you go. We got an opportunity. I don't know. Maybe it will put them to sleep or something. I don't know. So strategically place the mock scrapes, the water hole, the food plot, and then kind of like the next layer is kind of steering and funneling the deer through these attractions, if that makes sense. Like, so I've created a network of trails, like coming out of the wooded side. I've used hinge cutting to create certain trails that I want them to use to access the attractions. Mainly that's for steering them out of the potential for getting my wind, for bringing them into shooting range and into shooting lanes. And then also like move the overall, like kind of the pattern, the linear movement that I want to keep them moving. Like they come out and they feed, because it's a small secluded plot. It's close to mainly doe bedding. Like they come out, they eat, and then they move off to the primary food sources. So you don't have them really like, milling around in range for an excessive amount of time where, you are increasing your odds of getting picked off. Whether that's you move at the wrong time, you have to sneeze, whatever it is, whatever reason where that old nanny picks her head up and goes, yeah, I don't like that.
Right.
And
there's no point in calling attention to yourself, and
yeah, yep. And so
you don't have to on a small property, because it hurts you more if you get hurt.
That's exactly it. And then the kind of the rest of the property is more like old field.
Okay.
And so I just basically I mow trails. So the combination of coming out of the wooded section, of using hinge cuts, felling trees and using the tops, and then I created a little early successional staging plot. It used to be a food plot. It was on my downhill side.
Yep, I remember that one.
I didn't like it as a food plot because, again, they stayed there just long enough that I had concerns of just little micro switches in the wind, and a little stray scent gets to them, and that's all you need. So now, with it being early successional, yes, there's some things that they will come in there and they will browse around and stuff for a little bit of time, but it's not quite the same as, a little hidey hole of brassicas or something like that, where they're just
not quite as attractive.
Yeah, but the other part of the attraction level of it is the cover aspect of it, and
that's what I want to get into.
And that's what stages them coming from that direction. It serves as a little area where they come in, they pick off on some of the pokeberry, some of the blackberry brambles and stuff like that. They're kind of picking around on, and then it because of that, especially in the evenings and late afternoon, that thermal is starting to pull down the hill. The main food plot's just uphill of them. They feel like they're getting the wind of the food plot area, and they have the cover that they're kind of situated in, but they can't visually, from where they are, they can't see the food plot all that well. Just gives them just enough incentive to go ahead and move up out of there to get the visual. They feel secure enough because they've got that little bit of cover, and they've got what they think is a wind advantage.
So do they ever not check the food plot because they're on the downwind or on the downwind thermal side?
I have not seen that yet.
Okay.
And I think I think a lot of times the deer, they just have a check down, it's like, okay, everything smells all right. Everything looks all right. I don't hear anything,
why not go check it out?
Right. At this point, it's like, well, I know there's a big ass scrape up there that every deer in the area is hitting. I want to go check that scrape and see what what the status is, what's going on. And while I'm there, I could get a little bite to eat since the coast is clear, or
Yep.
in the odd scenario where, like this year, there's a water hole. So that works. And then on the uphill side, like I said, it's mainly old field type of habitat, early successional, and I've mowed trails that kind of collect them from the bedding areas outside of my boundaries, and just kind of entice them to walk that particular route into the like the epicenter of the attraction. And what that does, and the angle I've cut the trails and stuff, they're not since they're coming from uphill, the trails are angled so that their vision is not focused in the direction of my tree.
Sure.
It's angled so that when they're looking more or less straight ahead, they're not looking at me. They're not looking directly towards my tree.
That's a sexy little detail. Did you learn that the hard way, or did you just do that by happenstance? Or tell me about that a little bit, because I want to ask about that and the cover. I don't know if you're directing through hinge cuts, or you mentioned directing. It was the mowed trails. It sounds like. How high is that cover on both sides of the deer when he's moving through there? And is there a food plot trail that he's walking on, or is it just a trail?
It's just so a buddy of mine has a
thing to be just a trail.
No, my buddy of mine has a DR walk behind mower, and it's literally the width of the brush cutting head on that, which is like 30 inches. And the way the food plot is shaped, there's a part of it that is essentially a food plot trail. Okay.
Sure.
And that's where I'm kind of one of the directions I'm collecting deer from is kind of coming into that and then moving along. I kept that purposely short because I don't want a deer to come out onto that and get hung up with taking their time, picking along. Next thing you know, they don't quite get to where you need them, and it's too dark.
It's dark, yeah.
Yeah, so
you mow the cover around that, or you keep the cover shorter around the entrance to the food plot, or what I would call maybe a little funnel where it's still skinny, about to get larger into the food plot?
Yeah, so it's just like a little finger off of the main body of the food plot, and it's 15 yards at its widest, and it's maybe 9-10 yards at its narrowest, and then there's mowed trails that come into that particular little narrow spot.
Okay.
And then there's a mock scrape about halfway the distance or the length of that narrower portion that leads into the bigger part of the plot. The other mowed trails, as far as like how I kind of decided to set them up so that like they weren't looking right at me, because again, when they're coming from that direction, they're uphill. The further away from me they are, the closer to eye level they are.
Okay.
So in the afternoon, the way the sun is facing, I'm fairly illuminated. So if they're uphill of me and about eye level-ish with me, and I've got a bright sun, just the slightest movement and I've been looked at, and or even when I've been sitting there perfectly still, I don't know what it is. Maybe they weren't even looking at me, but I felt like they
might stick out something.
Yeah, exactly. So and again, like I try to use these modifications or manipulations to create an advantage. So the advantages are, to keep them from smelling me, keep them from seeing me, keep them from, detecting me in whatever way possible. Just so that, again, you try to get that advantage, and then going back to that, as I call precision volume hunting where
Oh, you took the words out of my mouth. Nice segue, Phil. Nice segue. I was just going there.
yep. So
Awesome.
that's what I'm looking for. It's a precision strike, but I can repeat it over and over again as long as the conditions are right.
And I guess, I mean, before you dive into that a little more, or maybe explain what that means and hit that point, then I want to hear about how it turns into volume of success over how many years. I mean, you've had quite the amount of opportunities here, and I think we haven't really touched on it after I hit the record button. So the listeners are probably wondering, like, how good is this killing tree?
I mean, I've killed 5 really good bucks for Pennsylvania.
Heck yeah, you have.
And the last 3 years, it's been a 3-year streak. And let's see, I want to say 2011 was the first year that I kind of like at the point in I had been that's how enlightened.
Okay.
For hey, I can do these things and manipulate things and deer will respond to them in a certain way, right? So by that point in time, I was already starting to mess around with different techniques and methods and stuff, and like still trying to see how the deer respond. So like 2011, I had a buck that I ended up having 3 years of history with. But in 2011, he was a 3-year-old, 125 inch 9-point. At the time, definitely would have been the biggest deer I ever shot. And was just, for my area, like you're in the upper 20%. Like that's, you're not getting too many opportunities like that. So,
nice, man. Same here in Michigan. Same here.
Right. And I just, I needed him to take about 3 more steps and I would have had a shot at him. Didn't happen. It was a cool encounter. He was harassing a group of does. And there were 2 young bucks in the mix, like 1-year-olds, little guys. And I got to watch him posture and chase them off, and he would come circle back around and like he would almost like corral the group of does into like a pile, and then he would like come trotting into them and it was like a bowling ball hitting the pins, and those does would scatter and then he would like sort it out a little bit more. Cool. But then the little bucks would be like, oh yay, and get back in there, and then he'd have to chase them. I mean, it was awesome. It was like 2 hours that I watched this whole thing just continue to happen. It never got into range. And then the last time he hit that group of does like a bowling ball, this one like trotted my direction, and I was like, please, please let that be the one, like if just let's, please. And then he stood there and he looked over at that doe as she was walking my way, and he put his head down and just basically started a determined walk. And he ended up kind of nosing her around a little bit and heading towards the one shooting lane I have in that direction. And she stepped into it at like 34, 35 yards. And then she bedded down. She just laid down right there, and he stood there for a second, and then he laid down, and they stayed there for 45 minutes. And I ended up sitting in the tree for like, however long after dark, because it got dark, and that was it. Eventually, as I was sitting there, I heard a little bit of rustling over there. It sounded like they stood up, and she started to walk away, and he was kind of grunting, following her, and they walked off. And then I found one of his sheds that winter. And then the next year he blew right up into he turned into a 10-point as a 4-year-old, and was every bit of into the low to mid 140s. I found one shed off of him that winter. I I saw him from the stand twice, but it was never within range. And, that was kind of some of the experiences that like galvanized, like, how do I make it so that I don't just see them passing by out of range? Like, how do I start to try to figure out a way to, like, just the way the movement is going to flow, they're going to end up coming right by me. Then the next year, he ghosted. I know he got injured after he had shed his antlers the previous year. And I ended up finding his complete set the last year, his match set. And it was a total freak show of I think he has 15 scorable points. He went down.
Jeez.
Yeah, he went down in overall in gross score, but in character, it's a really, really neat set. I'll send you some pictures sometime. But and then that deer disappeared. But so anyway, 2011, I had almost had an opportunity at that buck. 2012, like I said, I saw him from stands and had a number of bucks on trail camera in daylight in bow range from my stand with me not in it.
Of course.
And then in 2013, I shot 120 inch. Well, he would have been about 120 inch as an 8-point. He broke one G3 off on his right side. He's got about 2 inches of it left on his beam. If it matched the other side, which I think it probably did, he would have been right around 120 inches as a 3-year-old. And then 24. Yeah, great buck. And he's one that used was one of the first bucks to really, like, he read the script and he followed some of my habitat manipulations, like, to a T, like almost like exactly as you visualize it when you sat there, you know what I mean? You're like, that would be so cool. And then
it's almost like you have to shoot him now.
Yeah.
Like you're dead now, sucker.
Yes, exactly.
Follow my plan. It's too pretty. And
Yep.
I mean, I'm shooting any 3-year-old that walks by me here on my property. So don't get me wrong, but it's almost like if you follow the script like that, buddy,
right, you're asking for it, man.
You're asking for it.
Yeah, it takes a better man than me to I'll tell you that. And then 2014, I shot. I'm obsessed with 6 or 7 points. Like, something about a big 3-point side that I don't know. I think it's cool, and they're super rare.
They're just unique, yeah.
Yeah, and I'd say he's a medium 6-point. He's a pretty big 6-point, but he was a big bodied 2-year-old, and he was a bully. He was the day before I shot him. I watched him chase off 2 different 2-year-old 8-points that antler wise were much bigger than he was. And he was chasing does. He was grunting. He put on like a pretty legit show. And then he followed the script the next morning to a T from a kind of a project I had done the previous winter. And he was like the first buck that did that on that, still from the same tree, but the different side of it. And I was like, when I saw him coming in and I recognized him from the day before. And I was like, also there was 3 days left in the archery season. And my son's birthday is pretty much right around the end of our archery season. And it was his 1-year birthday party was coming up, and it was like crunch time, like, got to get all the preparations, you know what I mean? And I was like, Yep, that's happening. And so I shot him. And 2015, I ended up missing a big buck. He was low 140s, 10-point. He was a 3-year-old that year.
Man, Phil.
Yeah, big deer.
Pennsylvania studs.
Yeah, he went on to be pretty much a local legend. Had 2 more years of history with that deer before he was finally killed. When he was killed, he was just shy of 160 inches.
Oh my.
Yep. So I missed him at 18 yards. I hit a branch in low light conditions. I called him in. So that was still just an incredible experience. And the crazy part is like over the next week, I saw him like 3 more times. But he wasn't falling for it again. And then 2016, I started getting pictures of a buck.
Oh, hold up. Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
Do you think so? He wasn't gonna fall for that again. What if you had a different killing tree?
It's
to throw a wrench into this entire podcast, I'll just throw a wrench right in the whole damn thing.
It's entirely.
Was he still on your ground?
Yeah.
Oh shoot.
It's entirely possible. It actually,
but maybe the wind wouldn't have worked out for that. You know what I mean? Because you were in your stand for a reason.
Yeah, and so it's funny you mentioned that because after that season, that following spring, I started prepping a new tree.
Yeah. Yeah. There you go.
And it was based on what
our minds think alike.
It was based on what that deer's movements were, but then I ultimately decided that it would have been that to make that move, it would most likely be your stereotypical precision strike, one and done. You either kill or you blow it up.
Yeah.
And I ultimately decided it wasn't worth the burn to blow the whole property up to do that unless, but like I said, I prepped the tree and was like, should something tell me that that's the move that I need to make, then so be it. But
I think that's all you can do. I like that.
Yep. So I made a couple little modifications up there and did some hinging and brush stacking to kind of reinforce what I had seen that deer do. But to make sure that it ended up by the one tree that I prepped. But then I've since then have never put anything into that tree. So
well, those big deer do something weird and unique, right?
Yeah.
So it's like you're going to change your whole plan around for one deer that's already, down
history.
the road. Yeah, it's already history. So
yeah,
who knows? But anyway, sorry about that. 2016, you were saying.
Yes, 16. I had started getting pictures of a really good 9-point. Again, he probably was mid to upper 120s. I felt he was probably a 4-year-old based on his body. And he was daylighting in mid-October, evening and in the morning, which was really odd for my property. And it wasn't until October 24th. I got in there in the evening. I actually had harvested a doe. And a lot of people sometimes, be like, wow, you're pretty crazy, like shooting does at that time again. I got a pretty good feel like, okay, I could shoot that one where it's standing right now, most likely where it's going. Once it gets dark, I'm good to get down, get her out of the way, and we're gone. And pretty much no disruption. I don't feel too bad about that, and I'm a big, like my family, we're big venison eaters, and that's a huge part of why I hunt. And, that 2016 was also a year with a lot of changes in my career and stuff like that. So like time wise, it was like, it made sense. I shot this doe and it worked out pretty much perfect. And I was like, doing like, okay, I should get down, get her out of here. And as I lowered my bow down and I was just standing up to get onto the climbing sticks, and I hear a buck grunting, and I'm like, oh boy, you got to be kidding me.
Oh boy, that's how it goes.
Yeah, and up the hill, this deer came, and he came into that early sectional staging area, and
nice,
and pretty much did the whole, like, he was scanning, checking,
and you're already thinking, where have we seen this before?
Well, this is the first time I actually saw one
okay.
do this.
Okay.
And then he eventually kind of moved up the hill heading towards the food plot. He was moving up through one of the trails I made, and he had the the sixth sense, and stood there on high alert, looking around, and basically just turned around and walked out, and did that kind of very stiff-legged, like, I'm not very happy about what's going on here, something's up type of walk, and
he got you somehow.
Yeah, he knew something was up. He didn't like it, and he never blew
or something.
Yeah, never blew, didn't stomp, didn't cause any ruckus, didn't never flag, didn't run off, just vacated the area, and then coincidentally that was the last encounter with that deer, and I never even got him on camera again. And then 2017 is when I experimented with that other tree, and I got picked off on that as I was making my move for the bow. It was a nice 3.5-year-old 105-inch deer, and he picked me off. I just wasn't. I was used to the advantages I had in my other tree, and made a little bit too quick of a move, and he literally just picked his head up, looked right at me. Gotcha. And then basically backed out the way he came in, and circled way out and around me. And then 2018, I shot the big 8-point. 2019, I shot a smaller 8-point, 2-year-old 8-point. And then this year, I shot a 110-inch 3.5-year-old 8-point. And that was all from the same tree. And all of those, I mean, they were the 2019 buck. He was a cool one. That was a November deer. I had 2 small bucks out in front of me, and one of them had spent the entire morning running around grunting his head off. I mean, I'm not joking. That deer grunted 300-400 times in like 2 hours.
That's like, so cool, though.
Yeah, it was awesome. And he was kind of like taking a little like R&R. He actually bedded down in a food plot about 20 yards out in front of me. And then this the 8-point I ended up shooting came in, and he came walking in, and he worked the scrape, and he decided he needed to show those 2 younger bucks who was boss, and bristled up and did the little sideways walk with his ears back, rolled his eyes back in his head, and did like a bluff charge on the one. And then by that point in time, I was already at full draw and couldn't help myself.
Wow. And I don't blame you.
Yeah, it was cool. They're all great hunts, great stories. I don't have a single regret. They all, ate well. I mean, we had many good meals out of them. I've got a problem with I'm gonna need to acquire more wall space, and
I hear you there.
But and I do my own Euros and stuff, so spent the time getting them all cleaned up, and I've got some plaques from wood that I cut from the property that I'm gonna eventually get finished and get them mounted on, and that'll be kind of cool. And it's been great. I mean, by some people's standards, they're all kind of medium, but for me, I mean, they were everything that I could ever want in a hunt. And
well, there's only one person's standards that matter. So
exactly. And that's how I hunt. That's what I do. I hunt my hunt. I'm not too concerned about anything else. And when you're up there in the tree and you put a lot of work into the place, and things are working kind of the way you want them, or the way you want them, and it's exciting, and the adrenaline's pumping, and sometimes it's just you can't ask for anything better than to have that opportunity, take the shot, make it count, and have the memory, the experience. I've always hunted with some guys that are older than me, and one of them was a huge believer in the only way you get good at killing deer is by killing deer. And
very true.
In a lot of ways, I think that's a true statement. There's probably several ways that could be interpreted, and is what it is. Over the years, I passed a lot of bucks. I've passed bucks that are the size of or even bigger in some cases than some of the bucks I've shot. It's just, sometimes the trigger gets tripped, and that's all it is, man. And it's a good time. And I don't have any regrets on all of them. I think it was just been a really rewarding experience to get the opportunity to be able to work on a piece of ground and harvest some really good bucks and a lot of does, and you just just been blessed in that regard.
Wow. Well, I mean, I don't think I could have wrapped up a show better myself. You literally just told a ton of information with a bunch of good stories and tied it off with a bow. But I always have one more question, and I wasn't asking this question back when we had you on the first time, so I'm very intrigued on what your answer is here. I think you know what's coming. I think I might know the answer. It might be sugar maple, but but I don't think it is. So I'm wondering, Phil, what's your favorite tree, habitat or hunting, whatever? You might just look at it.
Yeah, that's
cut it up and throw it in your smoker. I don't really know.
That's a tough one. That's a tough one for someone like me.
Okay, give me two then. You can give me two. It's fine.
All right. So I guess one that is a tree that I've always been kind of obsessed with since I was a kid, and have always just had an appreciation for, which is the eastern hemlock, Tsuga canadensis. It's always been a tree that, like I said, I mean, growing up as a kid, it was one of the first ones that, I learned to identify. It was a tree that, as a young Cub Scout and Boy Scout and all that stuff, all the older scout leaders and stuff, it was an important, survival tree because the little dead branches make great tinder and are always dry because they're sheltered, from the rest of the tree. And I've had some really awesome tree stands in hemlocks, great cover, a lot
That's
of
what
low.
I was just gonna say, heck yeah.
And sometimes you don't even need climbing sticks or anything. Like, you can just use the branches, like old school back in the day, had quite a few of those.
Yep.
And then it's unfortunately with the woolly adelgid, we're starting to lose them. So I like the smell of them. I mean, there's just a lot about a hemlock that's always been a tree that I've just been intrigued with. And then I guess secondarily, and this is probably one of those things where a lot of people be like, wow, that's an oddball one.
Oh, cool.
Especially because I kill a lot of them.
All right.
The American beech.
Oh yeah.
So
that's
to me,
it's on here.
Yeah, it's an iconic tree. Again,
Hemlock, I think.
Yeah. And the forests that I grew up in and that I hunt a lot in are dominated by beech and to a lesser extent hemlock. In my particular area, we don't have any oaks. And the only real hard mast producing tree is a beech tree, which most people might not necessarily know or realize. Like a lot of masting trees, you have bumper years and you have non-mast producing years. A beech tree has anywhere from a 2-year to a 7-year cycle. In most areas, the beech trees will all have kind of a similar cycle. In my area, it's like a 5 to 7 year. Every now and then it's 5 years. Occasionally it's 6 years. Sometimes it's 7 years where you have like the majority of them masting. It's a bell curve. So you'll have some trees that will mast every 2 years. You'll have some that might not mast, like every 8 years or something. But somewhere in that 5 to 7 range in my particular area. And when it's raining beech nuts, it's actually some pretty incredible hunting. I killed my bear in 2017.
I was gonna say bear, love them.
Yeah, bear, grouse, turkey, deer, coyotes, like you name it.
Wow.
And especially when in an area that's like I said, there's no other hard mast tree. So like they're a real true like treat type of thing. Like when they're on, it's on. Like you'll find the wildlife just really stacked on those groves, those beech ridges and flats and stuff. Like the ridge that I killed my bear on in 2017, in her fur, she just had beech nut husks all tangled in her belly fur.
No way.
Yeah. And then I saw another bear about 15 minutes after I shot her. That whole area looked like somebody was in there throwing hand grenades. It was just tore up. The forest floor was destroyed in 2 or 3 acre area. All manner of wildlife, grouse, turkeys, like it's unreal. So, in areas where there's beech and there's oak, a lot of times even in hard, in the big beech masting years, there's usually like enough acorns that it's completely overshadowed. But in the absence of the acorns, beech are pretty impressive as far as a masting tree. It's just, they're it's a long time between between bumper crops. And then there's also the whole management issue of beech bark disease that really caused some serious problems for other beneficial forest regeneration. And
and you can have like a beech monoculture in some forests too. I mean,
yep.
northern Michigan where I hunt, similar to some parts in Indiana, similar to where you're at.
Yep.
There's just beech everywhere. All it is beech.
Beech, yeah.
And it's got some cover, which is nice. And it is beautiful too. But I mean, there's a bunch of it.
Yep. And that's another part of the thing I like about it in our area, in terms of like up in some of the big tracts of public land and stuff like that, like where the beech bark disease has killed out the mature stems, all the sprouts and suckers that come up from that very shallow rhizome system, root system, forms these dense stands of, we call it beech brush. You're talking thousands of whips that are anything from, pencil to, 1 or 2 inches in diameter, anywhere from 3 foot to 10 foot tall, and just stacked on top of each other. But the beech holds the beech holds the leaves so late that a lot of times some of those beech brush thickets, especially when you get later into the fall and into the winter, represent some of the only cover in some of these large forested tracts. So a lot of times they actually end up holding a lot of deer, just for the cover aspect alone, especially once the hunting pressure really starts to stack up, and they just need to get into some cover and get away. But yeah, so there you have it, 2 fairly I guess probably not so popular trees, but they're 2 of my favorites.
No, that's awesome, man. And I'm glad you have some different answers. And I think both of those are fresh to the podcast. So appreciate that.
Yeah, not a problem.
Well, I know are you still planning on possibly contributing to the Habitat Journal?
Yeah, absolutely.
So I was just going to say a way that people can find more from you. Your podcast episodes will both be up at our website. And then we're going to start getting some articles and some content from you, which I'm super excited to read, and get those up here too. But if anybody else doesn't want to go to the website, where else can they find you? And if they want to ask you questions or anything else, because it's worked before. So
Yeah, I mean, Facebook's probably like the easiest way. So just my name, Phil Holcombe. If anyone, wants to reach out with any questions, by all means.
Oh, that's awesome. And you've been a, super big help, to our listeners who have reached out to you. There's been a few of them, and, help to me as well. So I appreciate you coming on again, Phil. It's been long overdue, and don't think there won't be a third time, because I'm telling you right now, there will be.
Awesome. I appreciate it. Look forward to it. Yeah, for sure. We'll be in touch.
All right, man. Well, hey, be safe this winter in the woods with your chainsaw, and I'll be hearing from you soon.
Awesome. Will do. Likewise.
Thank you so much, listeners, for coming and listening once again to the Habitat Podcast. We really appreciate it. If you could, please do us a favor, leave us a 5-star review on iTunes or wherever you listen to this podcast. If you type out something nice, I will send you a free Habitat Podcast decal. If you haven't been to our website, habitatpodcast.com, we have our Habitat property consultation services on there under the land plan tab. Check out our HP land plans there. We also have hats, t-shirts, and decals up at habitatpodcast.com. Of course, all of our podcast episodes. And then we have a new Habitat Podcast journal where you can learn about deer anatomy and some cool thoughts, more of a blog post from us every now and then. We'd really love it if you went over to our Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube, found the Habitat Podcast, and please subscribe. That really helps us. And thank you very much to our sponsors. We have Michigan Whitetail Pursuit, Packer Max Cultipackers, Huntwise, Killer Food Plots, the Habitat Hook, Realtree United Country Land Pro, Lake States Realty and Auction, and Morse Nursery. Thank you so much, guys, for tuning in once again. Get back with us soon. We're going to have another great episode for you as we become better habitat managers.